My name is Elijah Marks, and what I'm about to share with you is something I never imagined I'd be telling anyone, let alone publicly. If you knew who I used to be, you'd understand why this is all so surreal. I spent nearly my entire life convinced that people who believed in God were just grasping for comfort. To me, religion was a crutch, something people turned to when they couldn't handle the hard truths of life. I didn't hate God, I just thought he was a fantasy. I believed in science, logic, data. I needed to see it, touch it, prove it. I was the kind of guy who laughed at the idea of angels or miracles. I used to roll my eyes at stories of people who claimed they died and came back. I thought they were just hallucinating. That all changed in the summer of 2018 when I died on the operating table. And I mean that literally, not symbolically, not emotionally. I flatlined, and I saw what was waiting for me. I was 59 at the time, working as a senior analyst at a financial firm in Connecticut. I had built a comfortable life, married to my college sweetheart, Dana, for over 30 years, with 2 grown daughters who both had their lives on track. From the outside, things looked stable, even ideal, but I wasn't taking care of myself. I ignored warning signs, persistent fatigue, shortness of breath, a tightness in my chest that would come and go. I chalked it up to stress or bad posture. When the chest pain started to become more frequent, I assumed it was heartburn. I even joked about it. Just too much pizza. I told my co-worker one afternoon, but on August 21st, I was walking up the stairs of my office when I suddenly felt this crushing weight in my chest, like someone was pressing down with both hands. My left arm went numb, and I collapsed on the landing. They rushed me to St. Luke's Medical Center, and within a few hours, I was prepped for emergency quadruple bypass surgery. The blockage was severe, multiple arteries nearly closed. The surgeon told my wife that they didn't have time to wait. I remember lying on the gurney under those blinding lights in New York, looking up at the ceiling and thinking, I just need to get through this. I'll rest after. The anesthesiologist leaned over me, told me to count backward from 10. I remember getting to 7, then nothing, or at least that's what I thought would happen. But what came next is the part that's hard to describe, not because I don't remember it, quite the opposite, but because words fail to capture it fully. One moment, I was drifting into unconsciousness, and the next, I was no longer in my body. I was above the operating table, looking down. It was so vivid, so clear. I could see the surgeons working, the nurses moving quickly, the heart monitor flatlining. One of the doctors shouted, "We're losing him." And I remember thinking, wait, that's me. But there was no panic, no fear. I felt a calm wash over me, like warm water. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't even surprised. I just felt free. I watched them frantically try to bring me back, but it didn't matter. I felt like I had shed a heavy coat I didn't even know I was wearing. I was weightless. I could hear things, see things, but it wasn't with my ears or eyes. It was something deeper. Then I noticed a light in the distance, just a tiny speck at first, but it grew steadily. It wasn't just light, it was alive. It pulsed. It called to me without words. And I felt something pulling me toward it. Not dragging me, not forcing me, but drawing me with the kind of love I never knew existed. I floated toward it effortlessly as a room around me, the hospital, the world, faded into something else entirely. When I tell you that I entered a place beyond comprehension, I don't mean it dramatically. I mean it literally. It was like stepping into a realm where color, sound, and feeling were all woven together. Everything vibrated with purpose. The air itself felt sentient. There were no buildings, no streets, but there was landscape, rolling hills of golden light, rivers that shimmer like glass, and a sky that seemed to breathe. And in the center of it all stood a man. He wasn't glowing, and yet he radiated more light than the sun. His presence was undeniable. The moment I saw him, I knew exactly who he was. Jesus. I didn't need to be told. I didn't ask. I just knew in a way that didn't come from logic or learning. And the craziest part? I didn't resist it. The years of denial, the jokes, the lectures I gave about religion being a lie, all of it collapsed in a single moment, because when I saw him, everything inside me fell silent. He looked at me with eyes that seemed to see every corner of my soul. I felt completely exposed and yet completely loved. He didn't speak out loud, but I heard his voice clearer than anything I'd ever heard. It filled me, echoed through every part of who I was. He said, "Welcome, Elijah. I've been waiting for you." I broke. Right there, I broke. My knees buckled, if you can even call them knees in that place. I felt this wave of grief, not because of him, but because I realized how wrong I'd been. My whole life I had mocked, doubted, dismissed, and here he was welcoming me with love, not judgment. He reached out and touched my shoulder, and the moment he did, it was like a flood of everything I didn't know I needed came rushing in: grace, forgiveness, understanding, and above all, peace. He looked into me, not at me, but into me, and said, "Your journey brought you here. That's what matters." There was no anger. No, I told you so. Just love. Pure, overwhelming, holy love. And then he began to show me my life, not like a slideshow or video, but as if we stepped into it. We revisited moments I hadn't thought about in years. Times I'd helped people without realizing it. Small acts of kindness that had ripple effects I never imagined. But also the times I hurt others, brushed them off, ignored someone in pain because I was too busy or too self-absorbed. It wasn't shameful. It was enlightening. He wasn't punishing me. He was helping me see what I had missed. And that's when I asked him the question that had been building inside me the whole time. Why me? Why show this to someone who didn't even believe in you? And Jesus, he didn't hesitate. He smiled with a warmth that wrapped around me like a blanket and said, "Because you needed to see it, your story will help others." That sentence is tattooed on my soul now. It was never about being perfect. It was about being open, about being willing to see what I had refused to see. I don't know how long we were there. Time didn't seem to exist in that place. It could have been minutes or years. But eventually something shifted. The peace remained, but I felt a pull, like something was calling me back. I looked at him, and I knew what was happening. I said, "I don't want to go. And he responded gently, "You have more to do, more lives to touch." And as the light around him began to dim, his voice echoed one last time, "I am always with you, even when you can't see me." And just like that, I woke up. When I opened my eyes again, everything was chaos. Blurry figures moved above me. Machines were beeping, alarms blaring, voices overlapping. My chest felt like it had been cracked open and stitched back together with fire. But none of that mattered in that moment. All I could think about was the light, the peace, him. I was back in my body, but something inside me had shifted so profoundly that I knew I'd never be the same. I heard someone yell, "We've got him back!" And there was a cheer, subtle but full of relief, from the surgical team. They had resuscitated me after I had flatlined for over 2 minutes. 2 minutes in the hospital. But to me, it felt like I had lived a lifetime somewhere else. The recovery wasn't easy. Not physically, not emotionally. For days, I lay in the ICU, hooked up to wires and IVs, drifting in and out of sleep, trying to make sense of what had happened. The doctors chalked up what I described as a side effect of anesthesia or oxygen deprivation to the brain. Some said it was my subconscious trying to make sense of death. But I knew better. I know better. At first, I didn't tell anyone, not even Dana. I didn't have the words. How do you explain something so far beyond explanation? How do you tell your wife, your children, your friends that you died, met Jesus, and came back different? I feared they'd think I had lost it, that it was just the trauma talking. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, I couldn't keep it inside. It was burning in me, not in a bad way, in the kind of way that tells you this experience wasn't just for you, it was meant to be shared. I started with Dana. One night, long after she had fallen asleep beside me, I whispered, "I need to tell you something." She sat up and listened. I told her everything. From the moment I left my body to the second Jesus told me I had more to do. She didn't laugh. She didn't doubt me. She just held my hand and cried. That gave me the courage to open up to others. I told my daughters. I told my pastor friend, who, ironically, I used to debate and challenge about faith whenever we had dinner. I even told a few co-workers, though I kept it brief. Not everyone was receptive. Some nodded politely. Some looked uncomfortable. But a few people looked at me like they were seeing something they'd always hoped for but never dared to believe. I started attending church, not because I felt obligated to, but because something inside me hungered for that connection again, for the presence I felt during my time in that place. I found a local church that didn't mind questions, that welcomed doubt and curiosity, and slowly, I started to feel like I wasn't alone in this anymore. The first few Sundays, I could barely make it through a worship song without breaking down. I wasn't crying because I was sad. I was overwhelmed. Every lyric, every prayer, it wasn't just poetry anymore. It was real. It meant something. It was a love letter to the Jesus I had met. And then came the change. I started noticing things I used to overlook. I became more aware of how I spoke to people. Waiters, clerks, the janitor at the office. I began volunteering at a local homeless outreach center. I used to walk past those shelters and think, They probably did something to get themselves there. Now I know better. Jesus showed me the ripple effect of every action, every word. Even a small smile, a kind gesture, it can change the direction of someone's entire day, maybe even their life. I became more present with my family. I apologized to people I had brushed off or treated poorly in the past. Colleagues, friends, even an old college roommate I hadn't spoken to in years. I started writing letters to people I had hurt, even unintentionally. I wasn't trying to atone for my past like it was a checklist. I just couldn't carry the weight of pretending anymore. I knew what mattered now. And more than anything, I realized how fragile and precious this life really is. Not in a scary way, but in a sacred way. Before, I lived like I had all the time in the world, like the next day was a guarantee. But when you look death in the face, when you've actually stepped into eternity, you come back knowing that every breath, every laugh, every hug is a gift. I used to be in a rush all the time. Now I linger in moments. I actually look into people's eyes when they speak. I listen more. I love deeper. I've been asked more times than I can count, do you fear death now? And my honest answer is no, not even a little. I'm not in any hurry. Don't get me wrong. I love my wife. I love my family. I love this life. But when that day comes again, and it will, I won't be afraid. I know who's waiting for me. I know what I saw, and I know that he is real. And to anyone listening to this, whether you believe or not, whether you think this is just another story in a sea of NDEs, I get it. I was you. I lived my whole life on the side of logic, facts, and control. But let me tell you something heart to heart. The love I felt in that place, the presence of Jesus, it was more real than anything I've ever experienced on this earth. I didn't imagine it. I didn't dream it. I lived it. And I live now with purpose because of it. I'm not here to convert you. That's not my job. But I will say this. Stay open. Just stay open. Because if it could happen to a man like me, a stubborn, logical, skeptical man with no room for God in his life, it can happen to anyone. And if you've been hurt, if you feel lost, if you're carrying pain that no one else can see, know this. You are loved. Even now, even in your doubts, even when you can't feel it. My near-death experience wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new one. A better one. One where faith is no longer just an idea, but a relationship, where every day is a chance to live with gratitude, with humility, and with the deep awareness that we are never truly alone. If this story spoke to something in your heart today, don't let it fade. Take a moment to reflect, to ask questions, to pray, even if you've never prayed before. You don't need perfect words, just a willing heart. And if you've had a similar experience or you're searching for answers, share your story in the comments. You never know who needs to hear what you've been through. This isn't just Elijah's story. It could be yours too. And remember, no one is beyond the reach of grace. Jesus is closer than you think.